Hello, and welcome to Passing the Mic, a series of conversations that will explore the issues that matter most to school leaders, teachers, students, and parents. I'm Sashelle Harris. While all students were impacted during the pandemic, remote and hybrid learning scenarios exacerbated many existing opportunity gaps. In response, the state of Massachusetts created the Acceleration Roadmap to help students achieve success both in the present and the future. In this first of a three-part series, our Vice President of the Northeast Region, Arlene Sukran, sits down with Commissioner Jeffrey Riley to discuss the groundbreaking work the state is doing. We hope you enjoy this conversation. Arlene, take it away.
Thanks, Sashelle, for this opportunity. Commissioner Riley, thank you so much for being with us today. I'm so delighted to hear more about the work that you're leading in Massachusetts, and TNTP is just delighted for the partnerships we've had over the past few years. So I'll introduce myself. My name is Arlene Sukran. I'm the Vice President of the Northeast Region. In that capacity, I oversee our work consulting services in the Northeast region, which includes Massachusetts. And I'm just delighted as a former principal and former teacher and a first generation college student. This work that we're doing means a lot to me, and I'm excited to hear more about your vision and what you've done in your state. So with that, Commissioner Riley, would love to hear a little bit more about you, and then we can head into the questions.
Sure. Thanks for having me. My name is Jeff Riley. I'm the Commissioner of Education in Massachusetts. I started my career many years ago as a teacher in Baltimore City. Spent most of my time working in urban areas, Boston, Lawrence, Massachusetts, before becoming the commissioner.
Well, thank you for that. And so today we're going to hear a little bit about the academic roadmap that we've been working with, and love to hear from you. Where did the idea from the roadmap come from?
I think it really came from listening to educators, our superintendents, our principals and other leaders, our teachers especially. Every year, I think well before the pandemic, educators have had to determine the strengths and needs of students that they were bringing into the classrooms each year, and to figure out the best way to build on those diverse strengths and meet their needs. And so for us, given the shock to the system that was COVID and the interruption of education moving to remote learning, we realized we had to kind of set forward a path for people to follow. We know the pandemic greatly exacerbated the depth and breadth of students' needs, particularly our students of color, English language learners. I think may be shown to have been the most impacted by being out of school, as well as students with disabilities. On top of that, educators and students are carrying a lot more on their shoulders and stressors than they've ever had to. This has really been a shock to the system, and we wanted to have a document that we could kind of point to say, this is our way forward. We've heard from the field that they need some support around how to prioritize instructional practices. We know that a lot of teachers kind of took what we gave and said, yes, this is how we operate. We agree with this. But we also know historically there's been a tendency to want to remediate rather than accelerate. And I hope we can talk about more about that later.
Oh, that sounds great. And definitely, I'm sure that teachers appreciate the support that this document has provided for them. Would love to hear a little bit more into the weeds of the resource that you provided. How has the roadmap and learning acceleration supported equity work in Massachusetts, and how the conversation shifted as a result of this work?
Yeah, I think equity has always been explicit in our work at the department since my arrival. We were able to kind of push through what we call the SOA, which is the Student Opportunity Act, which rebalances the calculations for student funding, particularly for students in urban areas, as well as we've done a lot of work on promoting high quality instructional materials, right? We know that kids have a wide variety of instructional materials at their disposal, when the reality is we know that some materials are better than others, and we really want to both promote and incentivize districts to give the kids the best standard-based instructional materials that they can. And I would say beyond all that, maybe the biggest goal that we have at the department is to diversify our workforce. We know that almost 40% of our kids in Massachusetts are kids of color, but only 8% of our teachers are. And we know the research, right? The research shows that a student of color that has just one teacher that looks like them before 8th grade is more likely to graduate from high school and have better life outcomes. And so we've got a lot of work to do in this area. We have shown some growth, promising initial growth in the state, but there's more work to be done. And so when we think about how to deal with equity, a lot of what we've dealt with is based on data, right? We've seen the opportunity myth study that came out in 2018 that found that, kids weren't really getting grade level instruction. We found that white students, by the way, were getting like 4 times as many high quality lessons in their classrooms compared to students of color. And we've got to change that narrative. If we really believe in equity, we've got to make sure that all of our kids are getting high quality instruction. We also saw kind of the ZERN data out of 2021 that kids struggle less if they're given grade level appropriate material and not remediation. But we also know that students of color, students from low income backgrounds are more likely than their wealthier, kind of whiter peers to experience remediation, even if they've already demonstrated success on grade level content. And that's something that we wanted to make sure that we spoke to in this document. The roadmap has kind of allowed us to put our commitment to equity in action, providing concrete strategies that schools can implement to confront and address inequities they see in their classrooms. We also can't separate the need for students to feel authentically part of the school and their community from their learning experience. So I think the roadmap also kind of creates a sense of belonging as one of its priority areas. It's actually the first one, that grounds the work in this idea that student and family voice is important, two-way communication is critical, authentic engagement, and culturally relevant practices are going to be like what's expected for our kids. And, we've seen the data around students feeling disengaged from their schooling, and we know we need to do a better job. And the best way to do that, in my opinion, is to make kids feel safe and feel like they belong, but also give them material that's relevant to their own lives. And that's what we're trying to do. And none of this is really new, right? I mean, we've known about the opportunity myth for a long time, but we're trying to use our bully pulpit to say, this is what matters to us.
That's so encouraging to hear. It definitely resonates with me, the fact that these are issues that have been here long before the pandemic. I think now there's just a brighter light and more attention to this challenge. So, we talked a little bit about, authentically investing stakeholders. So we'd love to hear, we know that this is a challenging time in education. We also know that our students need great learning experiences more now than ever, to your earlier point. Given the educational landscape of this unprecedented moment, how are you and your team authentically investing stakeholders in the Learning Acceleration Initiative? We talked a little bit about that, but we'd love to hear some more about what the authentic engagement has looked like with a variety of stakeholders. I know that you all are doing quite a bit of work in that area.
Yeah, I mean, as you mentioned, I spoke a little bit about it before, that we, at the outset, we kind of engaged people and voices from the field in the work to develop this roadmap. But we've also been really intentional about incorporating stakeholder perspective and feedback throughout the entire scope of the work. So it's not just at the outset, but it's all the way through the process. We had educators, including those at the classroom, school, and district level, who are our end users, involved as early as during the vendor selection process, right? In terms of shaping guide content, we conducted focus groups, and we had one-on-one conversations with educators, families, students, advisory councils, and advocates from across the state to give kind of the key input we need on the structure of the document. In some, I think we had over 200 folks from across the Commonwealth, across the state, contribute to the final roadmap products. So we've really tried to be intentional in making this a we document and not just kind of a state document. Since then, we've also kind of constantly gathered feedback on what's helpful, what's missing, and where we could adjust support to be more impactful. This has led to us shifting and expanding our supports to provide kind of a variety of resources and professional learning opportunities to help with the implementation of learning acceleration. We're currently in the process of gathering feedback and data on the effectiveness of the supports this year to determine how we can even do better going into next year. So it's kind of a continual process of stakeholder engagement, building the document, and then refining it through putting it out in the field in action. And that's kind of the way we're doing business.
Thank you for sharing a little bit more about the feedback. It sounds like you've done a really nice job of you and your team did the nice job of implementing feedback throughout the way. And so on that token, would love to hear, do you have an example of feedback that you've received from one of your stakeholders that you'd like to share?
I think for us, probably the best feedback that I could point to is just the demand we see from the individual districts for the training around our acceleration roadmap. We've really never seen that kind of demand before we put out a lot of training, but I think it's really resonated with a lot of people, and people were thirsty for kind of a path forward that makes sense. And this roadmap, it focuses on a sense of belonging. I would argue, we've got to meet our kids' most basic needs before we can even get to instruction. And this roadmap really provides the way to do both.
Appreciate that. Definitely hear you on the basic needs, especially during this time in our country. So, as you reflect on this process that you and your team, Como, the team has gone through, what have you learned through this process that you'd like to share with your peers throughout the country?
Yeah, I'm not sure we're the experts on anything. I would say that what's worked for us, I can kind of speak to. I think it's this focus on students' primary needs first. When the pandemic first hit, we worked really hard to set up, over 1,000 feeding centers to make sure that our kids were getting meals that, they typically rely on for in the public school setting. And that kind of philosophy is carried through into everything we've done. It may be because I'm a former adjustment counselor, but I really think it's because we have people inside the department who have been practitioners and recognize that we've got to take care of our kids' most basic needs first. And I think, the social emotional needs, the isolation that happened to students, the anxiety, the depression, the disconnection has been real, which is why we kind of focus there first. And I think that's been really important for us as a state, so that we can then get to the quality instruction.
Thank you. One thing I like to share is as a result of the work that I've done with Desi and with, the state, your colleagues, I've really been inspired. And I know many of my peers throughout the country have been inspired as well. And so as we sit here and reflect on the work that's happened in the past, we'll love to take a second to think about what's coming up in the future. What lessons do you want to carry into the future as we enter this next phase of this exciting work that you're leading?
Yeah, I mean, I can name a few lessons that come immediately to mind. The first is the crucial need for partnerships. The work we've been able to do together with TNTP has been crucial for our students going forward. But we have other partnerships with, from philanthropies to community colleges to outside agencies. And it's really going to take all of us to really work to get our kids back to where they need to be. So I can't underscore enough how important partnerships I think are going to be both now and in the future. I think we've learned from COVID that we always have to be prepared. I knew from my skillful teacher classes that provisioning and always being ready for the unexpected is crucial. COVID's taking that to a new level for all of us. And so when I think about COVID going forward, I think, we'd all love to say there's going to be an endpoint, but the reality is that we probably won't know the endpoint for several years. It may be that we have times of quietness where the rates are very low or non-existent and a variant pops up later. So we've just got to be ready until at some point the medical community can say that we're really completely past that. So preparation is number two. And then, the final thing is I think it's going to take time. I think we all as an educational community have to recognize that this has impacted our children, and it's going to take time to kind of get everybody back to where we need to be, and we're willing to do the work, but we recognize it's not kind of a 1-year fix and then we can just kind of go back to business as usual. My hope is that COVID in some ways has shaken the Etch-a-Sketch clear, and that we can really get back to thinking about what's next in education, right? How can we make our lessons more engaging? How can we ensure that we're closing achievement and opportunity gaps? How can we create kind of the next model for education so that our kids are doing even better in the future than they've done in the past?
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And it's really been a pleasure speaking with you today to learn more about your work. I know the work that you all are leading is taking a lot of hard work along with your teachers and school leaders. And we just so appreciate our partnership and hope that you have a nice day.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you so much for being here.
Take care.
Thank you for joining us for this edition of Passing the Mic. We encourage you to keep the conversation going and share your thoughts with us on social media using the hashtag #PassingTheMic_TNTP. We look forward to connecting with you during our next conversation. Until then, stay safe.